Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, the show about hot takes other than hot tasty pancakes, where by Poseidon's trident you shan't find no luck. Are we gonna have a tight show? I don't give a Welcome to Pop-O-Holics show with the tastiest takes on the internet. My name is Chris Cady, I'm the host, and I'm joined by my two best friends,
Chris Conkling
and Brian Dupree.
Welcome back to the show. It is Easter Eggies, celebrating all the films of my man, Robbie Eggies.
Robbie Bobby Eggies.
Robbie Bobby Schlobby Eggies.
Robert Robbie Bobby Eggies.
What way to get into the Easter spring spirit than watch a lot of spooky, questionably immoral white people films? I can't think of.
I'm ready for Easter. I'm in the mood.
Can't wait to dive into the blood of Christ. What is this show? Well, we take every month, we theme it. On our main topic episodes, which is one you're listening to, we take a specific film that is either upcoming or that is already out that we're celebrating, or an older film. And we just kind of center a theme around it. So we're all in favor of the Northman. We're going through the short but illustrious career of Mr. Robert Eggers. And it's been very exciting. We've covered The Vitch. We're covering The Lighthouse on this episode, and we will be covering The Northman next week. You can also tune into our weekly uploads, which is more topical, popical culture. That's my new catchphrase. Really taking shape now. Where we talk about like what's coming out on streaming that week, or what we've seen recently, things we've been playing, video games and stuff, books we've been reading, that kind of thing. So that's a more like loose caboose kind of situation over there. But this right here,
Still tight.
this is tighter. Well, this is tighter.
It is. This is tighter.
That's more of a Willem Dafoe. This is more of a Robert Pattinson. You know, if we're, just
Comparing it to The Lighthouse.
to the Lighthouse. That's right. So let's jump into it. Today we are talking about The Lighthouse.
Tell me, what's a timberman want with being a wickie?
Just looking to earn a living, just like any man. Starting new.
On the run. Keeping secrets, are you?
No, sir.
Why don't you spill your beans? Why don't you spill your beans? Why don't you spill your beans?
That is from the trailer of The Lighthouse. Man, watch that trailer. Reminds me of why I love this movie so much. Directed by Robert Eggers, written by Robert Eggers and Max Eggers, with a score by Mark Korven, cinematography by Jarin Blaschke. With a budget of $11 million, it grossed $18.3 million, so not quite the hit that The Vitch was. But, looking at this, I bet you it's gotten a lot of streams in the post-release, because it's got almost 12 million views for this trailer, which is quite a lot for an A24 flick.
It got picked up by Prime not that long after it came out, I think. So I'm sure it got a decent following when it came there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it stars a very large cast here. It stars Robert Pattinson, which I believe from watching interviews is the entire reason this movie got made, is because Robert Pattinson wanted to do anything with Robert Eggers as our main character, Willem Dafoe as Thomas Wake, Valeriia Karamän as the Mermaid, and I won't actually point that one out. We'll keep it in the show notes, but maybe not look there if you don't want spoilers. So we are going to do non-spoiler talks. We know it's been out, but it is streaming on Amazon Prime. Thanks for pointing that out. Brian's also available. I believe there is a Blu-ray of it, which I'm holding out for that Ultra Blu-ray, because, man, I as I said on the weekly upload, Daddy over here, I can call myself Daddy because I have a son now. Daddy over here got himself a new OLED TV, a C1 LG. So sort of mid-tier OLED. But, man, there was a sale at Best Buy, and this was such a great full film to break her into. And we'll get into that when we share our thoughts. But we'll have in those non-spoiler thoughts. So if you haven't seen the flick, no worries. We won't be spoiling it if you're like listening to this to see if you want to stream it or whatever. But then we'll go into spoiler section for those who have seen it or don't care. We'll talk about the themes, standout moments, and our final thoughts. So we'll keep it nice and tight, like Robert Pattinson. Ugh. What's a handsome bloke like you doing out here on the sea? All right, let's get into it. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts on The Lighthouse? Chris, I want to start with you.
Christian, I had a tremendous time watching this movie. It was so, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to say this. And I doubt that this is like what most people feel about this movie, but watching this movie was so much fun. I don't think majority of the movie is supposed to be comical, but I couldn't help but watch the film unfold, and there were several moments where I just laughed out loud. I think the movie is expertly crafted. It's incredibly well shot. I'm glad that Robert Eggers went with the 4:3 aspect ratio, because that aspect ratio kind of adds to the claustrophobia of the entire film, which I really appreciate. I like that the film's in black and white. I think that Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are delivering excellent performances despite Robert Pattinson's ridiculous accent, and that may be one of the things that kind of added to the comedy for me for this movie. But it was an exceptional time watching this movie. I will say, last week on the podcast, we had Susan Tekla-Kruglinska on the show, and we asked her what she thought of The Lighthouse, and she said she felt like it was kind of pretentious. And I will say, this film is a little indulgent, but I think in the best possible way. There's like this great H.G. Wells-esque story unfolding, and I'm here for it, man. This is a movie that I would watch multiple times over the course of my life. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed my experience with The Lighthouse. Maybe not for the same reasons as everybody else, but we'll dive into stuff and spoilers. It was a blast.
I don't think there's necessarily a wrong way to enjoy the film. But I get what you're saying, which is like, I don't think it's artfully good. I just think it's entertaining.
Oh, it's incredibly entertaining. Watching both of these men descend into madness over the course of the 2 hours is incredibly entertaining.
That it is. I would agree with all those points. Brian, your thoughts on The Lighthouse? You had seen it before, just like myself. So revisiting it, what are your thoughts, from those two watches?
Yeah, so this is my second time seeing it. I saw it in theaters when it came out. And as Chris mentioned, gorgeously shot in black and white. Very much fits the setting that they're going for here. And the set design, Robert Eggers. I mean, we haven't seen all that much from him, but just consistently incredible set design and costuming really puts you in the period that you're in. And they built this lighthouse from the ground up, if I understand correctly. So just absolutely incredible stuff happening here. It's funny, Chris, because I think it is intentionally funny at times, for sure. And it does this interesting, at least attempt at a tonal balance between literal fart jokes and sea shanties and ominous, intensely delivered monologues, right? So it does kind of have that interesting balance that I can understand how maybe you're leaning one way or the other, and that kind of spills into the more serious attempts at things in this movie. But it's really just an examination of the harsh reality of what this job is. One of my notes was like, this movie is manual labor, because it really just walks you through so much of the ins and outs of keeping up this sort of establishment, the house and the lighthouse itself. Dafoe and Pattinson bring so much to these characters and have this kind of father-son but also brotherly relationship that is confrontational at times, but also bonding through this kind of traumatic isolation that they're going through. I think this is a GOAT level performance from Willem Dafoe, though. He has a couple of moments in this movie that are just absolutely breathtaking and incredibly well done that we'll get to in favorite moments. But I don't think he was nominated for this. I can't remember if he was or not, but it's an absolute shame, because this performance is absolutely top tier and just wonderful. And the writing that's done for his character is a big part of it. But his delivery, we get some kind of uncomfortable close-ups at times. I feel like the way the close-ups are shot are kind of interesting and like not exactly straight on, but very interestingly done close-ups. I feel like you could have a multiple hour lecture on the artistic influences, mythological influences here that I'm not nearly informed enough or equipped enough to discuss. But this feels like a real amalgamation of so much lore and mythology, but still manages to feel like a fresh and original story. Obviously, early on in development here, Edgar Allan Poe was kind of an inspiration that kind of like fell to the wayside. You definitely have some like Hitchcocky sort of stuff here. The birds in particular, a clear influence at times with this movie. H.P. Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos a little bit as well. And obviously
H.P. Lovecraft, that's what I meant.
Okay,
I said
yes.
H.P. Wells. Sorry.
H.G. Wells, right, yeah. But yeah, definitely some Lovecraft stuff. And then the Greek mythology, definitely heavily pulled from, as well as kind of just standard like occultism and stuff. This movie just has so much to dig into. Christian, I probably agree that with how tight The Witch is, and The Witch is also kind of a slow burn, this movie did feel a little, I don't know if I would say that it dragged, but if it was a little shorter, maybe it would be a more accessible watch, not necessarily the intent of the movie to be accessible. But looking back on it, I can't really find anything that I would have personally cut, so I think it is a slow burn, but I think it pays off well, and it keeps me it kept me captivated throughout, even on second viewing.
Yeah, well, maybe we can get to more specifics and spoilers as far as like what could be cut out of this film to make it a little tighter. And I don't think it's an easy answer because I like most of the things that are happening on screen. And I'm overall really positive. It's interesting. I've kind of had a little bit of a 180 on my thoughts on The Witch versus this, because I remember seeing The Witch and being like, that was good, but seeing The Lighthouse and being like, oh, that was fantastic. And my most recent watch of The Witch, I'm like, oh, you know what? I think I might be leaning towards The Witch being a better film on second rewatch of both of them. But still, like, it's a tough call because The Lighthouse is trying to do something almost in the same vein, but very, very, very different. Where, at the end of the day, it's a modern myth, right? It is a modern telling of like a myth. It's very fable-esque, similar to The Witch. And I really appreciate that he's able to do that. I think part of what makes Robert Eggers so special from what we've been seeing in these two films and what I'm excited about with The Northman is this commitment to historical like accuracy and to tell the history of it as much as possible, because as much as this is a ludicrous, there's parts of this film that seem, otherworldly, supernatural, ludicrous and all this stuff. And clearly, they're really leaning on a lot of that. There's such authenticity throughout the characters and how they behave and what their stories are. And I do think both performances are really great. Although I do think Robert Pattinson's character reminded me of similar characters that Thomas Middleditch has played, a comedian in like improv. There's a little bit of that. I think he's mostly doing really great work here, and he's obviously just such a comedian.
Is it the mustache and the accent?
It's he kind of sounds like John F. Kennedy. There's this like John Kennedy kind of thing going on, while also being like, I don't know, like a newsboy from New England or something. So it's very fun and entertaining, but I can see how that can distract you a little bit. But I largely think it's really good, especially going up against Dafoe, who's full pirate, for lack of a better term.
Sounds like a parody.
That line.
There's just so many, speaking of lines, there's just so many genuinely great written dialogue. Like, I can't think of a movie in the past, year that I've seen that even comes close to the density of how great the prose are in this, and how infinitely quotable that this film is because of all the fun conversations that happen, which is really important, because I do think that the other half of this story is the camera work. And I texted you guys jokingly, like, this is the better, weirder aspect ratio movie than Justice League. Because although, Snyder has his reasons for doing Justice League in the way he did, and I do think there are some minor benefits to it, you can really see the difference between an ultra-intentional director using the format to maximum benefit. And
right,
I'm so glad that I got an OLED TV, because I don't think it would be. I thought this when I saw it originally, but really getting those perfect blacks to mesh completely in seamlessly with the frame of the picture into the camera. Like one of our first shots is Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson's character standing side by side, and they're kind of joined by the edges of the screen. And so there are these shadowy figures that come out from the edges of the screen. And the film constantly is playing with that aspect ratio in insanely cool ways. It looks like a tight, narrow window into this, like you said, claustrophobic space. And it's so effective, the way it transitions from room to room in the lighthouse, the way it goes up and down, the way characters come in and out of frame. It is this edge of reality that we're constantly moving in and out of that is so awesome to watch and really doesn't get old. And it's a combination with that, great performances and the great dialogue. That means that Robert Eggers can get away with the most batshit plot I've ever seen, have seen in forever. I mean, it's nutty, what we're seeing. And we'll get in spoilers about what's real and whose perspective and all those other stuff that are great conversations to have. But I think Robert Eggers said it best in an interview when he said he just wanted Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung to fight at eating popcorn watching this film, and I think he accomplished that goal of just eliciting what do you see in this, because you could have so many elements you attack it from of what's happening and what are the reasons. Which again, my favorite type of film. What gets you talking, what lets us bring our own personal experiences in and reflect back on. And I have some very specific things that I see when I watch this movie that might inform our listeners on me as a person. But really, really interesting stuff. I think I think you'll come away, even if you like I told Susan, even if you don't love the film, I do think it's interesting enough that I can't not recommend it to anyone. Of just watch it and then
you'll take something away from it.
It was weird. But I'm all for these weird films. And Brian, you said it's a little up its ass. That's as a criticism that's been heralded at his movies. There's a level of pretension. And I don't know how I feel about that, because there is, I think he would agree, there's a level of self-indulgence. But to me, this movie is all about self-indulgence and a lot of those things.
So, we've talked several times about several different movies when it comes to directors being a little too self-indulgent. We've talked about Tenet and Justice League and now this. And like I said earlier, in terms of self-indulgence and really just creating the art that you want to create, I think this is one of the best examples of doing something like that. Whereas with Tenet, Nolan's self-indulgence when it comes to sound mixing is a detriment to the theatrical experience, in my opinion, where this isn't. It doesn't hurt the film in any way. It really just adds to what this movie is, everything that Robert Eggers wanted to do with this.
Habitual self-indulgence.
I think they're both pros and cons to being so indulgent. What was that, Brian?
Habitual self-indulgence in the shed.
Yeah, exactly.
Get fired for that.
Was it something like brutally harming yourself in the shed, habitually harming yourself in the shed, or something like that is what they said?
We've all been there. We've all been there. All right, gentlemen, anything else before we go into spoilers?
Let's dive in.
Let's crack her open with spoilers for The Lighthouse. There it is. That's my favorite sound effect. Just to dive right in, the foghorn blares throughout this entire film, and it's that with a mixture of other things that kind of always keep you a little annoyed during watching this, and on edge, in a good way of just the tensity of the situation. Yeah. And for the rest of the spoiler section, I will be intermittently injecting the foghorn sound.
Good for our listeners to know that. While I was watching this, and it's interesting that you bring that up, the foghorn, the ticking clock, there are all these Foley elements that, like you said, kind of play consistently over the course of the film in the background. I couldn't help but think of our viewing of Eraserhead and how frustrated I got with all the industrial sounds in the back of that sound mix. But this was not that experience. I think this is indulgence in the best possible way, where it's not a detriment to the art. It supports it. And I really enjoyed both of those elements because it adds to what both Dafoe and especially Robert Pattinson are going through, especially in terms of like just their minds cracking.
Oh yeah, and there's a time when you hear the light spinning around while Pattinson's looking up at it, and it almost sounds like a heartbeat. Like it just becomes this kind of living entity that they're with. Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, so that kind of spiraling into madness and the sound design really enforce, I think, every theme that you could possibly bring to this. But I've talked about several times about movies being a Rorschach test, and I think Robert Eggers makes this specific brand of movies where he has just an abundance of influences, and this film is no different. We're talking mythology and history, as well as the history of psychology and myth. Like all this stuff is coming together. So there's quite a few things, a bounty, if you will, of things that you can pull from watching this film. So I'm very curious to hear what you guys ultimately think this film is about. Brian, let's start with you.
So sometimes for themes, I'll write, like, kind of get some real notes. I kind of just wrote words down this time. One thing that really stuck with me this viewing, and that kind of informed how I was reading it, was gaslighting. So I feel like Dafoe, from the get-go, obviously we can get into a little later the reality of everything that's happening here and who everyone is, but I'm not sure I realized the first time through that when Dafoe first tells him that it's their last day and that the ship is coming, that they could have been there for like 4 days at that point. And from that point on, he's just constantly lying to him, and who knows what the perspective we're getting, if how obvious it seems to us that what he's saying is untrue is actually untrue. But from Pattinson's perspective, he just has no reference point, and pardon the pun, is lost at sea, is adrift kind of with this man who is so much more informed and aware of what it takes to survive this kind of environment and climate. So the fact that he's basically at the whim of Willem Dafoe because he's his superior in this situation. And yeah, gaslighting and just the ability in a relationship when you have the power dynamic that Willem Dafoe has and uses often, with a strong hand, you can really manipulate and abuse someone in ways that can psychologically break them and destroy them. So that was one of the big ones for me this time through. Do you guys want to touch on that a little bit before?
Yeah, I think that one version of what's taking place that you could take away from this film is that Willem Dafoe is a man obviously obsessed and in love with this light, and he needs a second to essentially take care of everything around the lighthouse and in the facility. We learn early on that, well, he tells us early on that his previous second in command ended up going mad and killing themselves. But who's to say that, this isn't the second time that Willem Dafoe has done this to somebody, essentially gaslit them, driven them insane, all while abusing them into taking care of his facility so he can focus solely on, this deity-esque light source that he's just become obsessed with. It's crazy.
See, that's what's really interesting, because in that scene, he on its face, he's talking about his second in command's beliefs, but this time I realized that he's actually kind of spouting his own beliefs, and this is the first planting of the seed to kind of start that temptation of, oh, there's more here. Like, I have this thing; it's all mine, and it's magnificent. But Christian, did you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, it's hard because just to spoil out my thoughts, but I always both times I've watched it, I've always seen the two characters as one person, and it being an allegory for
that's definitely a possibility.
Id and ego. I don't know if that's the way that
he even says it at some point, which is another form of gaslighting. But he's like, I may be just a figment of your imagination or something like that.
Right. So pardon me, and I think there could be an argument to be made that we're all seeing this from Robert Pattinson's point of view, and we know that he just went through, by the end of the film, that he went through a trauma. So his perspective might not be very reliable, which could still play into your thoughts on the gaslighting nature, because he's in a very vulnerable state, right? So he's likely
Gaslighting himself.
Well, no. He like from being gaslighting that can further damage his psychological state and cause him to kind of drift further into madness because Willem Dafoe is such a horrible person who's a control freak and really like is very, very selfish and all this other stuff. So I definitely see that perspective. It definitely is a play in the film for sure.
So yeah, but I mean, I'm also sympathetic to what you were saying about. I don't know how much we want to dive into the. You brought it up, so like, I am sympathetic to this potentially being just Robert Pattinson, and the whole log that he's keeping is kind of a history of his past rather than Dafoe's past. And I mean, we're into it now. I don't know if this is going to be a favorite moment, but there is the kind of explicit when he. The whole time leading up to this, he's lying to Dafoe, or potentially if Dafoe is just him, lying to himself about his past and what he's done. And once he finally opens up about it, I didn't remember that in the trailer, the spilling your beans line is so...
I just spill your beans.
But Dafoe disappears, literally disappears after he tells him this. It's almost like the two sides have been combined. Pattinson has broken through what he's been going through, and he finally goes up to the lighthouse. And then we get this scene where Pattinson is, I don't know if he falls, but he's on his hands and knees. A hand reaches out, turns back, and it's himself. So we get two Pattinsons, and then we do a cut, and it's Dafoe again. So there's definitely some visual language happening there that could be read in the way that you're talking about. But yeah, the spill your beans thing, it's such a funny line, but it actually was quite haunting in the way that it was used, and definitely leans to serve that point you're making, Christian.
Definitely.
Yeah, and they both find out that both their names are Thomas.
Yes.
By the end of it. And you find out that Robert Pattinson's character is suspicious of Willem Dafoe for taking the identity of the last wiki there, right? There's this implication that he has stolen the identity of the person previously. So I just think there's a lot going on about, who the person actually is. And I don't think it still negates any of the stuff you're saying, though, which is the really cool part about the movie. Chris, what stood out to you other than laughing a lot?
Christian, I don't know what this says about me, but there's certainly a lot of self-flagellation in this movie, and I think there's something to be said about thematic elements of like male sexuality and the shame that some men feel when it comes to that. There's a whole scene in which Robert Pattinson, as is logged in the book, is, jerking himself off in the shed. And when he finishes, he basically just breaks down and cries. So yeah, in terms of like Jungian, Freudian themes, I know that's something that both of those men were a little fixated on when they were alive. I think
don't know
male
if you know this,
sexuality...
but the lighthouse is a giant cock.
It's a giant penis, yeah. So earlier in our weekly upload, if you listen to our weekly upload on Monday, I actually referenced a scene that the studio forced Eggers to take out of the film, and that was a transition from the lighthouse to Robert Pattinson's penis.
Oh, wow.
The movie is forever ruined because that transition did not happen.
So I definitely think that male sexuality is an incredibly prevalent theme amongst many others. We talked earlier.
You know why
about
that
how,
is, though?
You can take so many different things away from this movie.
Real quick, Chris, you know why they had to take that scene out, right? They wouldn't have been able to.
Why?
Rated R. Well, because it would have to be erect, and you cannot show an erect penis. Like,
so it would end up being like an NC-17.
You can't? I think you can. You could probably do it.
Name me a movie with an erect penis that's rated R and was put out in theaters nationwide.
Oh, wait. You're right. I saw Possessor, but it was Possessor Uncut, so that may have been actually above R. I did see a screening of it, but you may be right. Okay, fair point.
That is a fair point.
It was uncircumcised. Yeah, because I've seen, the only time I've seen an erect penis in a movie was actually another Willem Dafoe movie, Antichrist, but that's an NC-17, and it was released in like Europe in theaters.
That makes sense.
It's never released in like nationwide in theaters. But yes, I think that that is probably the biggest reason they did not show it, because you can't have the lighthouse, big, strong, thick, girthy lighthouse, and then go to flaccid Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, the transition wouldn't work.
No, it wouldn't.
You know, they both have to be erect. So
Yeah, the lighthouse would have to get floppy.
understandable.
Anyway, we've talked about erect penises enough. Chris,
Do you have
continue.
anything else to add about the the male sexuality and the thematic elements of this film? Either of you?
No, I
Or
can't.
am I alone?
I can't see that all in this film, Chris.
Okay.
No, definitely. Yeah, of course.
alone.
I think
You're crazy, Chris.
You're-
there was
what
no
you said
shots of
about-
anything sexual in here. That's on you,
I've just
bro.
been talking to myself for the last 3 years.
Yeah, this movie had nothing but boobs. Boobs, I tell you. Brian.
Brian, what were you saying?
Well, no, I just think in terms of what you said about the shame, it's just so interesting how, you know, these two guys out, we get hints, or Dafoe talks about how he was married at some point, but he was away for however long. Who knows if what he was saying was
13
actually true.
Christmases.
13 Christmases, he said. But then the fact that obviously both these guys have sexual urges. We see Pattinson kind of like peeping on Dafoe while he's sleeping, kind of like humping the bed or something at some point.
There's a hole cut in
And-
that bed, Brian.
Oh, is that?
He's fucking the bed.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I should have put two and two together there. Yeah. Okay. So when he's fucking.
It's not the only time that Pattinson peeps on him either. There are multiple instances in which that happens.
I was gonna say there's definitely some something going on there with like desires that they're projecting onto each other. They start when they get really drunk and start slow dancing. Dafoe leans in for a kiss, and then it becomes a fight. It's just the most like hyper masculine. Like, oh, I'm okay slow dancing with you, holding you close, but you take it one step further, and then I'm like, wait. Way too insecure. This is, even though we're out in the middle of nowhere, I can't even think about this. And it speaks so much to not only the time period, but the fragility of male sexuality and all the insecurities that come with that. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good shout. I do want to say, on that same token, the idea of fetish, like the kind of like the original definition, it's because you obviously have the sexual proclivity, and that's probably what most people associate with the word fetish. But there's another definition of an inanimate object worshipped for its supposed magical powers, or because it's considered to be inhabited by a spirit. Oh, so I think the token that he finds, I don't know what else to describe it. The mermaid token is kind of a fetish, and this movie is definitely leaning into this idea of there's kind of some ideas in certain magical practices, not stage magic, but like occult magic, about sexual energy and using masturbation as a way to charge things up, or basically some sort of energy, and using that. So I think the movie, I can't speak to it well. It's kind of beyond me, but this idea of kind of him really focusing a lot of his sexual energy on this thing, and then eventually it kind of becoming manifested throughout the course of his stay here, definitely ties into that sexual element. And obviously the lighthouse as the phallus, clearly a symbol that's stark and throughout the whole thing as well.
That's a great shout out, Brian.
I think this movie's about, no matter what men put their mind to, they're going to try to fuck it.
Do not put it past them. Yeah, yes, very true.
There's nothing you can do with men that they won't try to fuck. Whether that's each other, a pillow, a bed, a light, a fire, legit, like just a fire. So yeah, I think that all plays into kind of what I took away from this viewing, and I believe it kind of like hit me from the beginning, which was that idea of, at the end of the day, Robert Pattinson's character, Willem Dafoe character, is the same person, is ultimately about, killing the desire for knowledge, the tip of the penis, as it were, the lighthouse, the light itself, is the pursuit of knowledge. And this is very like Prometheus type stuff. Is this object that he can't get to unless he, fixes his most arcane base level desires. But at the end of the day, he ends up like completely separating those into two different people: the strict, rigid person that wouldn't drink, and the crazy, like, lunatic. And whenever he's able to drink, he's able to actually put himself at peace. And there's moments from him abusing substance that he finds this clarity and this peace. but everything else is chaos, whether it's fully indulging in his, him dreaming of the mermaid and his fear of the unknown, or the hard work of labor, which is the day-to-day grind. He's only finding peace through his substance abuse problem, but quickly that gets out of hand. And it ends up spiraling him out of control, where he does anything to achieve this peak thing, and it ends up killing him at the end of the day. So I just see, like, you can read this film very easily in my eyes, because I probably see the most basic interpretation of it, of dealing with your innate physical desires, as well as dealing with your pursuit to better yourself, and how those things can diametrically oppose each other. And again, at the end of the day, if you can build something, you're going to try to fuck it.
That was beautifully put. It went a little somewhere at the very end, but still agree with it wholeheartedly.
You had it. It was right there, and then you just had to come back to the one point.
No, that was beautifully put.
Any thoughts on that? Any readings that were similar there? Anything to it?
I don't know if I can expand upon that. I think you said it all there. That's a beautiful interpretation that I think is true, regardless of the how you want to read it. It's like that's definitely,
regardless of the verisimilitude of the statement.
Well, no, I just
yeah.
I just mean it's a totally. I read it as a totally valid interpretation. It's like I think that's definitely all there.
Yeah. All right, let's move on into our favorite moments. What are some standout moments or elements of the film? Obviously, we've talked about the cinematography and the prose, but are there any specific moment in the performances? But any specific moments that highlight those aspects for you guys?
I want to touch on something you brought up earlier, Christian. It's really just like a framing moment. It's the very beginning of the movie when they first arrive on the island, and Pattinson and Dafoe look directly into the barrel of the camera, and it holds on them for quite a long time. It's just this incredibly picturesque shot where it literally could have been a photograph from 1890. Yeah. And I love that
they've got that
what that photo's doing
that you see in all those photos.
They're really close together. Like they're neither of them are smiling. It really, for me at least, it helped put me in the era immediately. Like we see what life is like. It's a great snapshot of what life is like in the 1890s. And I think that's a great way to start the movie. And I have several other moments, but I'll let Brian take it from here.
I just want to touch on another one just like that. The moment when they are waiting for the tender, when who knows if it's the day that it's supposed to come, but they're just standing out on the rock face. The wind is blowing crazy. It's raining downpour. And it's like, this is just as harsh an environment as you can kind of imagine. And we just hold on it for like 15 seconds, just waiting there. And it's just gorgeous. It's obviously kind of terrifying, and you wouldn't want to be there, but incredibly shot. And speaking to the cinematography, Christian, I think you may have referenced it earlier, but there's a shot that we just basically travel up the length of the lighthouse from the bottom, and it kind of reminded me of the that really awesome shot we get in the Batman with the oh gosh, what is it called?
His grappling hook?
With the grappling hook. It's
where it's like fixed
take on
his face and everything's moving around him.
Yeah. But definitely really appreciated the cinematography. I think the painting, the lighthouse scene was a definite standout for me. It reminded me almost of the There Will Be Blood. There's kind of a similar thing that happens, but just kind of showing functionally how, I guess they didn't have... ladders probably weren't big enough for this lighthouse, so you just think about how you would have to paint this thing, and it's like, oh yeah, you're gonna have to literally have someone wheel you down. And just the way that we get the progression, he starts kind of going back and forth and eventually falls, and it's just insane tension that is, I don't know, I do not envy anyone that has to do this kind of job, and I'm not great with heights to begin with.
To put a lot of trust in the person that's holding that rope.
100%, and he may have just kind of screwed him over, honestly. Dafoe, I don't even think he helped him out after he fell. He just kind of leaves him outside. But yeah, the tension of that moment was really incredible. The progression of the seagull conflict. It starts just so almost like kind of silly, like the seagull's just blocking his way. He has the wheelbarrow and he's kind of trying to make noise to shoo him away. And how quickly it turns into this like representation of his frustration and potentially his psychosis. And at the end of this movie, we were like, did they have the no animals were harmed in the course of this movie? Because absolutely horrifying, the ultimate conclusion of that. I don't know if you guys were either of you going to bring up that scene, but from the, we see the bird in the water source, I guess, and
Cistern?
The cistern, that's right.
The cistern.
And eventually the one that he just takes his fury out on and bashes it entirely. I was just kind of dumbstruck by them. Absolutely brutal. Looks so real. And especially with, the warnings that he's gotten, it's like, oh God, things are not going to go well now, our Pats. But
Ryan, I didn't even take that into consideration. I just assumed that it was a prop. It had to have been a prop. There's no way they would have been allowed to do that to a real seagull.
Of course. On some level, I was thinking the same way. I was like, there's no way he would do this and then it would be shown. But it looked so real. And I think the black and white really helps too. But the blood splattering and the bird itself was just like, wow, it really convinced me.
Yeah, it's excessive, right? It's not like when you kill animals, you want to put them out of their misery as soon as possible. So just pure brutality and pure anger at like his rejection of anything. And I think this leads into the conflict within him, which is he rejects from the get-go, he rejects all things supernatural, right? He does say he's a God-fearing man, but he ultimately calls everything tall tales and all this stuff. Meanwhile, he's experiencing all these like spiritual level creepy things happening, and yet he just denies it. And that's, I think, it's such a perfect image of him just trying to brute strength superstition. He's like, you think, but as soon as he's done, he beats the gold senseless, and then he starts hearing goals and is immediately just scared even more. Like it did not fix the problem. He is actually more terrified now because he is just brutalized. As Willem Dafoe puts it, an old spirit of a sailor.
And it's interesting that you say that, Christian, because one of the moments that Brian and I were talking about over text that both of us really enjoyed and felt deeply was this moment where both Dafoe and Pattinson are arguing after they've been like left stranded. And Pattinson's going on this tirade about how he hates Dafoe's cooking. And that's like one of the only moments in the entire movie where like I think we're getting a genuine reaction out of Willem Dafoe's character, where he is actually heartbroken that Pattinson's character said that to him. And then he puts this like...
You like my lobster, though, don't you?
Right.
He's like, I see the way you eat it. Me lobster, and it's
You're
like,
fond of me lobster. Don't say that. Like
it makes me makes me want to cry, man. It's honestly so sad. Heartbreaking.
He almost has the face of like it's almost like the innocent face of a child when you say something that hurts a child's feelings, and you just know in that moment that like there's really no going back from it. But the way you're talking about him reacting to like beating the seagull to death and then like kind of realizing the supernatural and superstitious implications of what he's just done.
Post-masturbation shame.
There you go. There you go. It all ties together. Similarly, after he's belittled Dafoe's cooking and Dafoe's put this like Poseidon curse on him, the last portion of that scene is him like huddled in a corner going, "Have it your way. I like your cooking." And then it cuts to something else. So like now that the superstition has washed over him and like all these supernatural elements are coming to get him, he's like, "Fuck it. Okay, sure."
That's one of the funniest lines in the movie. What an incredible tension release after that monologue.
All right.
I legitimately laughed out loud.
That speech, it's a pretty profound speech, but it ends with hark. When you're throwing a hark in there.
You mean business.
Yeah. But you remember how that scene starts? One of my favorite lines in the movie. When he's like really talking about how he can't wait to get home, right? Because they're celebrating. It's the first time he's drinking because he's celebrating because he thinks he's going home. And he's like, "Oh man, if I had a steak, I'd fuck it.
I would fuck it."
Oh my god.
Well, we know what they're thinking about.
Hilarious.
And then, okay, so one of my favorite moments, because I didn't remember from my first time watching it. And this is one of those moments, Chris, where I just started bursting out laughing because the movie's just so crazy. But it's when they start mixing like paint thinner and the fuel for the light and turpentine or some other, I think honey or oil or whatever.
Some type of chemical, yeah.
That they're drinking now, like straight jet fuel, like high on paint thinner stuff. And Dafoe takes it for the first time, and the camera's moving up the lighthouse facing down, and Willem Dafoe just yells, "Monkey pump!"
The sign of a mentally broken man.
Monkey pump. He yells monkey pump. Because I did watch, you have to watch every Robert Eggers movie subtitles. It's a necessity. And I was like, he did just say monkey pump, which I think is going to be my favorite interjection from now on.
Ridiculous.
It's a great
Ridiculous.
line.
That's how I'm going to finish off all my sexual encounters from now on. I'm going to yell monkey pump.
Monkey pump.
It kind of reminded me of the Godzilla roar now.
Oh yeah, a little bit. Bit of a foghorn. Brian, were there any other moments that stuck out to you?
When they get into the straight up brawl and Pattinson's just wailing on him and he says, "You're killing me," or something like that. This is the other moment where it's just like, even though Dafoe is a total dick, he's also kind of hilarious, but you sympathize with this man because he's clearly, obviously a raging alcoholic, very obsessed with this lighthouse as well. But on some level, he still cares about this relationship and, to some degree. And yeah, I think he's just trying to be like, look, you're not trying to kill me, are you? And it kind of made me think of, and I don't want to spoil the witch here. But there's a moment where one of our characters is saying, "I love you, I love you," in a similar kind of very charged scene. And these moments that are kind of subtle but so human, they just really stick with me and bring emotional depth to these characters who may or may not even be real. Christian's theory, I think, is probably one of the best ways to read this movie. But this leads into him straight up putting Dafoe on a leash and burying him alive. And this is where we get another monologue from Dafoe that is like, how the hell this man was not nominated for this performance. And maybe I'm overstating it, but it's unbelievable having dirt dropped over his face, which has just got to be psychologically freaky regardless of if you're acting or not, and still delivering this incredible monologue. It's just really powerful and terrifying stuff that show like the deep, dark depths of humanity and what people will do to each other when they're, going crazy and isolated. But that moment with him getting covered, it felt like Leo DiCaprio getting nominated for his for The Revenant. It's like, this is way better than anything in The Revenant for me, and I get that nomination was kind of a a lifetime award as they usually are, but it's something that I can kind of compared it to just functionally. But yeah, just incredible stuff happening there with Dafoe. He's unbelievable. The last things that I wanted to bring up, we talked a good bit about The Shining last week. I think this movie clearly has some Shining references as well. Obviously all the axe stuff, I immediately think of The Shining there. But even maybe as explicitly or more explicitly, when Pattinson reads the log for the first time, we don't see the log, we just see him flipping through the pages, and it's that same shot of Wendy finding Jack's notes, and it takes so long before we actually get to see what she's looking at. And this time through, I was like, oh, this is clearly like influenced heavily, or even a reference to The Shining.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think but it feels uniquely him. That's what's cool about his style, is that clearly there's so many homages to the greats, but certainly a lot of stuff that's eclectic that even as a film nerd, I don't have all the reference points for what he's pulling from. But yeah, So that's those are some of my favorite moments. And any other moments that anybody else wants to shout out?
I just want to shout out some really silly moments. Brian kind of mentioned it earlier when they're arguing and Robert Pattinson is like, "You sound like a parody." Like, these are the moments that I don't want to say completely pulled me out of the movie, but they were certainly way more comedic than I was expecting. Him ranting and raving about your farts, your fucking farts. It's ridiculous.
They go completely
New England
uncommented
accent.
on
The first
before
piece
that.
of, especially if you're watching
there are-
subtitles, it's the first thing that references Willem Dafoe's character is Thomas Farts. It says Thomas Farts. It's like when he first meets him, he doesn't say anything. Then they're in the bed, and before he says a
I'm
word,
not sure I saw
Thomas
that
Farts.
sub. When he's introduced to, it's kind of, I feel like he's hidden behind the center pole in the room or something.
He is. He's peeing into the
Oh, is that what it's doing? Okay.
oh my gosh, my brain.
Chamber
The
pot.
chamber pot. He's peeing into the chamber pot.
I was gonna say latrine,
And
but
we
latrine
can't
is
see him.
the
We can
actual
just see the
pee.
stream.
More of a toilet. All right. Any final thoughts on the Lighthouse?
We didn't bring it up. I guess another final moment that kind of ties back to the witch. You brought up Prometheus earlier, Christian. When he finally gets to the lighthouse, reaches out, touches, enlightenment, the knowledge of the gods, whatever it may be. The acting that Pattinson's doing here reminded me very much, and again, I'm not going to spoil things from The Witch, but there's a scene of kind of this balancing between ecstasy, horror, and ultimately kind of death. And the progression on his face there and seeing what goes through it. I read an interview with Eggers where someone asked him, like, why didn't you show what Pattinson was seeing? And he said something like, well, if the viewers had seen that, the same thing would have happened to them. They would have ended the same way he did. And I just love that
Total
kind of
horseshit.
thing. It's
And
speaking of pretentious, well, no, but it's like
You couldn't
it's
possibly
like
and you
Raiders
couldn't
of the Lost
possibly
Ark,
get
right?
the audience to visually see what the character's experiencing. Like, there's no way to do justice. Yeah.
It could never do the same thing. Yeah.
What I love about that moment, and what Brian correctly mentioned and I incorrectly mentioned earlier, it's like the light of the lighthouse is the Lovecraftian element of this movie, because earlier in the movie we have Pattinson peeping on Dafoe jerking off in front of the lamp, and one of the moments of that scene is we see like these octopus tentacles kind of like wrap themselves around him, and that's what's so Lovecraftian about it. When Pattinson finally like looks into the lamp, I'm sure he's seeing this kind of like overpowering, beautiful monstrosity that like the human mind just can't wrap itself around. And if we're looking at the film in like more literal terms, and they are actually two people, maybe Dafoe's psyche is just so broken that he's just fully given himself into whatever Lovecraftian god this is. So he's more capable of just like living with it. I really, however you want to interpret that, I think it's really fun and cool.
I don't want to go on forever here, but this is just making me think of. I talked about Providence a few weeks ago, which is Alan Moore's latest Lovecraft comic, and there's this idea in it that remote locations or places underground or deep inside of caves, how the boundary between the material world and the dream world kind of becomes blurred, and things become possible that may not be possible otherwise. And I think that's definitely something that's playing into everything that's happening in this movie. They mention that this is like one of the furthest posts away from land, because you make the most money out there. So just pure isolation, and the human mind, it walks both those worlds and definitely can go to some crazy places.
The human mind. We're social creatures. That's how we keep each other sane. Are you kidding me? Look at how I've been since I started the podcast. Where I am now. I'm at home.
The three of us are definitely three sane individuals.
Which is always what sane people publicly acknowledge.
Of course.
We are very
they
sane.
reference how sane
Everyone
they
knows
are.
it.
I'm the id.
You heard it here.
I'm the id.
We're
Chris
sane.
is the ego, and Brian is the superego.
How's Brian the superego?
I don't really remember what they all
I didn't
mean.
know what this
Listeners, you
means.
dissect that and figure it out.
I don't really remember what they all mean. I just want to make Brian feel good by putting super in front of his name.
I appreciate it. Super. Yeah, it's like a superhero
You're
idea.
welcome. You're a dirty dog, you are.
I don't think that this movie is necessarily for everybody, but oh my God, if it's not just an incredibly entertaining and wild ride. If you're a fan of film, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners are, and you haven't seen this, this was my first time seeing it, and I wish that I'd seen it earlier. As I mentioned, I'm probably going to watch it many more times over the course of my life because it's just out of this world entertaining. So, highly recommend it. I know Brian, when you saw this in theaters,
because it has the Green Goblin and Batman in it.
We did get a "You're not my
caught me.
father" moment as well, just like in the Batman. I don't know if you guys caught that.
what was that?
We got a "You're not my father" or "You're not my daddy" moment here too.
Oh
I was
gosh,
like, oh, this
fucking
is
Pattinson.
You ain't no
this is
captain.
Batman.
You're not my dad. You fucking nothing.
But yeah, I highly recommend this movie. I know, Brian, you saw it. When you saw it in theaters, walking out of the theater, someone you knew said that they were just like not about what this movie was dishing out.
No.
And I think that's fair.
It's very uncomfortable.
But yeah, oh my God. It is.
yeah.
It is a very uncomfortable movie, but I mean, depending on the mindset you're going into it with, I had a fucking blast.
it kind of tears you down as a man. Because, I mean, I watch it and I feel the flaws of being a guy. You know, I feel how gross we are. You know,
I can
it's
see
just this
that. I can see
reflection to me of like, you know, oh, we fart and we fuck beds if we're horny enough and like jerk off to mermaids. You know, like we do, guys.
like guys do.
But there is this,
Jerk
there
off
is
to
this
mermaids.
level of like, you know, Dafoe. It's so uncomfortable, I think, for men to watch. I think that's a true thing because it makes me uncomfortable of like how much Dafoe has to impose authority, you know, to feel comfortable. Like I have responsibility and authority, and I have something sacred that's mine. And Patterson's character is like, you know, I like don't drink and I have rules and I'm gonna follow them and I work hard and I have, you know, has all these like ideals of who he is, but at the end of the day he likes jerking off to mermaid.
And he's a murderer.
Yeah, and he ends up killing somebody. You know, there's all these disgusting realities of the male existence that I
Without
think
a
are
doubt. Without a doubt.
uncomfortable to watch. Just there's so many moments of just pure masturbation happening from a man's perspective. So it's, you know, not everybody's favorite thing to watch men fart and masturbate. But us three.
The real question is here, Christian. Does it meet the annual dong? What was it, Brian? Fuck, I'm gonna fuck up this joke.
Dong quota.
The dong quota. Does this film help one meet their annual dong quota?
The award, the Dong Perignon Award. No, there's no dong. Like there's just phallic imagery, but we don't see any dick.
Well, release the Eggers cut with our Pats, the bat dong.
More Lighthouse penis transitions. Say the Pop-O-Holics.
I love if that's the note from the studio too. It can't be flat. If we put it in there, it's got to be flaccid. It ain't going to be symmetrical. It's not going to look good. You can put it in there, but it has to be
Look,
flaccid.
we'll trade you one Pattinson dick for mermaid vagina. That's all we can give you.
Mermaid.
No one is allowed to fluff Pattinson's
Hold on.
dick.
Can this mermaid vagina be fully engorged with blood, just like an erect dick? Absolutely. You can make the clitoris as big as the island, but you cannot show an erect penis on film.
Still couldn't find it.
See, this episode is why the Pop-O-Holics have been rated explicit.
We go on
On
some
all
tangents.
podcasts.
And the only
platforms.
podcast where you can find an erect penis.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh, on that note,
If I had a steak, I'd fuck it.
now I can only hear Thomas Middleditch.
I don't know. I just want to have a smoke. I'm just trying to make a good life for myself. Grow out this mustache.
The Lighthouse.
Monkey pump. That's it for the Lighthouse. Gentlemen, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
Loyal listeners and viewers, you can find me on Twitter at Chris Conkling, talking about all things nerdy.
And you can find me on Twitter at True Pop-O-Holic.
Find my band at Midnight Satire on Twitter, as well as on the streaming service of choice. Not So Serious Man is streaming now. I'm a musician. Listen to my music. It's fun. Oh, we didn't talk soundtrack stuff, you know? I think the soundtrack's very effective. Sound design is so good. A+.
We talked a little bit about the Foley work.
It's also got...
Not really the soundtrack.
Yeah, the soundtrack is very, like, buried in the Foley. It's very reliant on the Foley, but yes, very good. Obviously, that foghorn... Good stuff.
I do like how the ticking stops once Pattinson breaks the clock.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
I'm not sure I caught
What
that.
a great
Yeah,
call
wow.
out, Chris. Wow. You really do pay attention at the movies. That's why you're on the show. I'm just going to end it with this. Should pale death with trouble dread make Ocean caves our bed? God who hears surges roll, designed to save the suppliant soul. Got it. Dafoe.
nice.
Ocean. Ocean. The way he comes at that word.
Ocean.
Ocean.
Suppliant soul.
Should pale death with trouble dread make our ocean. You just got to do Green Goblin. Just do Green Goblin, but as a pirate, and you've got Dafoe's character.